Hi, I'm Lynn. My parents used to laugh at me across the dinner table, calling me useless, as if I couldn't hear. They sold my house behind my back, erased my name from every document, and told everyone I didn't deserve a thing. I stayed silent, until the day the bank manager looked them in the eye and asked for my signature. That's when their world started to crumble. The porch light flickered as I stepped out of my car, gravel crunching beneath my boots. My breath misted in the Iowa cold. I stood for a second, hands still on the door, looking up at the house I grew up in. Same chipped siding. Same brass knocker that no one ever used. It was dinner night again, mandatory, not requested. I didn't knock. I never had to. The door was always unlocked, like they were inviting in anyone but me. The warmth inside hit me as I stepped through, followed by the scent of pot roast and lemon pledge. Mom's obsession with appearances hadn't faded. "There she is," Charlene called from the kitchen, not looking up from her mixing bowl. "You made it." "Barely." "Traffic," I said. "You live 10 minutes away, Lynn." And that was that. I hung up my coat, already regretting the cream-colored sweater I'd chosen. Charlene would call it safe. She always did. The dining room was full. Rick and Denise were already seated, glasses of wine in hand, like this was some formal occasion. My father, Hank, looked up briefly from his paper, smirked. "Didn't know accountants got days off." "I'm not, never mind." They had wine. I had water. Story of my life. We sat. The table was lined with all the favorites, Rick's favorites. Nobody asked if I still liked green bean casserole. We launched into polite conversation, that ugly Midwestern kind, smiles and daggers. "So," Denise said between bites, "I closed on that lake house I mentioned last month. You should see the kitchen, Lynn. Granite, not that laminate stuff." I nodded. "Sounds beautiful." Rick chimed in, "And I just signed a deal with the Nebraska branch. We're expanding across 3 states now. Crazy times." "Congratulations," I said. It came out neutral. Like reading weather reports. Charlene looked over. "And you, Lynn? Still doing that little bookkeeping thing?" "Freelance," I said. "For several clients now." Hank chuckled without looking up. "Back in my day, they called that unemployed." Laughter. Light, familiar, like wind slipping under a doorframe. I took a bite, slow, forcing myself to chew. Denise raised her glass. "To Rick." "The golden boy." "To Rick," they all echoed. I sipped water. Then Rick turned to me. "Remember when you tried to start that Etsy shop? What was it?" "Hand-painted rocks." "They were motivational stones," I said. "You sold, what? 3? He smirked. "5, I corrected. He put on a falsetto. "I'm Lynn, and I believe in the power of positive pebbles." They all laughed. Even Hank chuckled, low and sharp. Denise, not to be outdone, added, "Oh. Or that time in high school when you showed up to prom in that green velvet dress, remember? She looked like a forest leprechaun." More laughter. I pressed my fingers into my napkin until I felt the edge tear. I said nothing. I've learned silence. It doesn't mean weakness. It means calculation. I remembered the scholarship letter. The one I tore in half after Grandma fell ill and no one else stepped up. No one mentioned that tonight. No one ever did. "You're quiet," Charlene said. "Too much kale in that freelance diet?" I smiled. "Just listening." Inside, I was screaming. My therapist's voice echoed in my head, "Silence is a response, too." So I held it tightly. We moved on to dessert. I cleared my plate without tasting it. As Rick raised his glass again, Hank leaned back and said casually, "And now that Rick's really stepping up, we're finally putting the house in his name." My fork paused midair. Charlene added, "It's just paperwork. Keeps things simple." I stared. Simple? I helped clean that house every weekend. Painted the porch. Installed a new mailbox one summer when Rick was too busy with work. I forced a smile. "Isn't it still under Grandma's will? I thought she split it between all of us." Charlene waved her hand. "Oh, don't worry about the legal stuff, Lynn. It's just house things." "Just house things." I tucked that thought away, slow and sharp. As the dishes were being cleared, Hank handed me a manila envelope. "Here. Just need your signature to update some banking records. For the house." I opened it. "Quitclaim deed." I'd seen enough of these in my line of work to recognize it. "What's this really for?" I asked. "It's just a formality," Charlene snapped. "Don't start being difficult." I met Hank's eyes. "Who drafted this?" "It's standard. From the bank." Rick sipped his wine, avoiding my gaze. "I'll have my accountant take a look," I said, folding the paper neatly. They didn't protest. Not loudly. But the air shifted. Denise reached for her wine again. Rick drummed his fingers. Charlene forced a smile. "Suit yourself," Hank muttered. I stood, calm. "Thanks for dinner." I slipped the envelope into my purse like it was any old receipt. But my heart was thudding hard. I stepped out into the night. Gravel again. Cold again. But this time, something was different. Sleep never really came that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling like it might give me answers. Every creak of the house, every distant dog bark, felt like it stretched time out longer than it should have. I kept seeing my father's hand sliding that envelope across the table. His tone, casual, almost bored. "Just sign this." My mother's sharp edge, "Don't start being difficult." That envelope now sat in the center of my kitchen table like it might explode. I hadn't touched it since. The manila paper seemed heavier than it should be, like it was holding something alive. I wrapped my hands around a coffee mug that had gone cold and just stared. "Just some bank papers." "You wouldn't understand." Those phrases kept pinging around in my head. It wasn't just what they said, it was how easily they said it. Like they'd rehearsed it. My memory dragged me back to childhood. Rick cheating at Monopoly, sliding extra $500 bills under the table while Mom refilled drinks. When I called it out, I got told I was too intense. He got dessert early that night. A client once told me, "If something doesn't sit right in your stomach, that's where your wisdom lies." I didn't get it then. I do now. The sun rose and I didn't bother changing out of my hoodie and jeans. I grabbed the envelope, shoved it into my bag, and locked up behind me. I drove to the only place I trusted with money, the local bank branch, tucked between a diner and a dry cleaner. Grandma used to walk here every Thursday morning like it was church. Inside, the warmth didn't touch me. The wood-paneled walls and clunky computer monitors were exactly how I remembered them. Mrs. Ackerman stood at the desk, glasses low on her nose, white curls pulled back into a bun that defied gravity. "Lynn Morris?" she said, peering over her frames. "Haven't seen you since your grandma's service." I gave a small smile. Still sorting through her files. She led me into her office, a room with faded curtains and a bowl of dusty peppermints. I handed her the envelope. "Just need a second opinion," I said. She opened it. The paper made a soft hiss. Her face changed like a curtain dropping. "Do you know what this is?" I met her eyes. "Not exactly." "This," she said, tapping the paper, "is a quitclaim deed. But not just that. It also removes you as a cosigner from any financial claims related to the property." My heart did a slow, deliberate drop. She leaned in, voice lower. "If you'd signed this, you'd have forfeited your legal right to anything connected to your grandmother's estate. No challenge. No appeal." I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just nodded, slowly, as if my body was trying to keep up with the blow. Mrs. Ackerman sat back in her chair. "Lynn, this wasn't a mistake. Someone knew exactly what they were doing when they drafted this." I left without saying much. Just thanked her, took the paper, and walked back to my car like I was floating. I sat behind the wheel with both hands on the steering wheel. No tears. Just clarity. That wasn't just dinner last night. It was an ambush. And that envelope wasn't just paper, it was a silencer. Back home, I didn't take off my coat. I opened my laptop, scrolled through my saved emails. Denise had once sent me a message 2 years ago, "Mom wants to talk property stuff, nothing major." That line now glared at me like a red flag. I opened my file drawer. Pulled out the printed will Grandma had mailed to all of us. Her handwriting still on the envelope. "To all 3 of you, keep each other honest." I started a new notebook. Wrote truth and timing at the top. That phrase felt right. Not revenge. Not yet. Just truth. On my terms. I flipped through my calendar. Jotted notes. Made copies. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to storm in and demand answers. Let them think I was clueless. That night, I made tea I didn't drink. Sat on my porch, letting the October air wrap around me like armor. I picked up the phone and called Mrs. Ruth, the woman who'd lived down the hall since I moved in. She answered after one ring. "Evening, sweetheart. Everything all right?" "I have a question, and I need someone who's been around long enough to give it to me straight." She chuckled. "That's why you're calling me, huh?" I explained vaguely. "No names. Just a scenario, someone being pressured to sign something they didn't understand." She paused. Then said, "People will go to great lengths when they think you're too kind to fight back." I leaned into her words. "Why do families turn against the quiet ones?" Her voice didn't flinch. "Because quiet looks like permission, until it isn't." We sat on the line a while longer. Didn't talk much. Didn't need to. That night, I didn't cry. I scanned every document I owned and renamed each file with one word: war. The afternoon light had dwindled by the time I pushed open the closet door. The box sat at the back, half hidden beneath old coats and winter scarves. I lifted the lid with care. Its scent, musty and familiar, carried whispers of childhood dinners and Christmas mornings. I found her letters first. Grandma's handwriting, careful and soft, spilled across yellowed pages: "Never sign in ignorance. Keep your mind as your shield." Each line folded like a promise she left me when she could no longer speak. Then came the photograph album. I flipped through until I found the image: a birthday party. My siblings and I standing around a cake. But in the framed version hanging in the hallway, I'd been cropped out. In that moment I knew, erasure was never accidental. At the bottom of the box I found a cassette tape: "Voicemail, January 9th, from Grandma." I frowned. Why had I never played it? I dug out an old cassette player, dusty but functional, and slid the tape in. The red light glowed. Her voice came through, wavering: "Lynn, please, don't sign anything they tell you. They're pushing something. Do not be part of it." My pulse jolted. Her voice cracked at the edges, like it came from a place of fear. I rewound and played again. That tape had been recorded before her stroke. Days before, I remembered. I had begged her to not go to that brunch. She said she felt faint. The stroke. The gathering. The envelope. It all clicked together. What if her collapse was timed? What if someone silenced her before she could speak? I closed my eyes and sat back, stunned. Betrayal tasted bitter in my mouth. This was the moment silence turned dangerous. The voicemail wasn't just a message, it was a confession and a warning. I dialed Denise's number, fingers trembling. The call connected. "Denise, did Grandma ever warn you about signing paperwork?" I asked quietly. She sighed. "Lynn, don't drag this out. You're making things worse." "Things worse?" I whispered. "This is why I am speaking now." She hung up. No goodbye. I pulled up my email archive. Found threads involving Rick, Denise, and our mother. Messages about property adjustments, survey plans, deed transfers, none copied to me. They had hidden everything. No rage erupted, just ice-cold resolve. Stillness. Silence given to me before. Silence I would now reverse. I copied every letter, voicemail file, legal doc into a backup drive. Created a folder labeled Phase 2, Truth Files. Then I made a list: lawyer consult, county records, medical records, deed history. I scheduled an appointment at the courthouse for the next morning. I named every timestamp, every voice memo, who said what and when. If it came down to it, they'd drown in documentation, not drama. Night crept in. I walked to the window and stared out at the streetlights. They trembled in the darkness. I made one call. Mrs. Ruth answered on the second ring. I said carefully, "I found something she left for me." She said nothing for a moment. Then, quiet people are pushed until they break. Then everyone pays attention. I held my breath. Why does family hurt so much more than strangers? Because they know you're light, and want to snuff it without a trace. I closed the line. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. But I saw clearly what I had to do. I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But the next file I opened made me question everything, including how much I didn't want to believe about my own blood. Driving back to the house felt like slipping into a coat I'd outgrown years ago, stiff, heavy, and lined with things I didn't want to remember. The streets hadn't changed. But every turn brought a knot tighter in my chest. Trees we used to climb, The old convenience store where Grandma bought my favorite licorice. They all felt like props in a play I'd been cut from. The envelope sat next to me, untouched, its corners soft from handling but its meaning sharp as ever. I looked at it like it might speak. Or explode. Maybe both. I muttered to myself, I'm not going there to ask for anything. I'm going to see things for what they are. I pulled into the driveway. The house loomed, curtains pulled, porch light off despite the darkening sky. Not even the porch swing creaked. Just stillness. When the door opened, it was Celine. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you came," she said like I was an afterthought. Denise was right behind her. "Mom's in the parlor." Rick was conveniently missing. I stepped inside. Carpet unchanged. That faint scent of old wood and lemon cleaner. I followed them down the hall. In the parlor, Mom sat on the couch, cup of coffee in hand. "Sit, Lynn," she said. "We should talk." Celine handed me coffee, too. I didn't touch it. "So, about that envelope," I began, keeping my voice even. Celine waved her hand. "We'll sort that later. There's something else." Mom leaned forward, her tone suddenly formal. "We've invited someone who might help clarify things." The door creaked. A man stepped in, older now, hair grayer, but I knew him instantly. "Mr. Hawk?" I blinked. "You were Dad's legal assistant years ago." "I was," he said. "And I've been listening for a long time, Lynn." The air went cold. "I remember hearing something. Something you deserve to know." He looked at Verda, then back at me. "Years ago, I overheard your mother and Celine discussing a revision to your grandmother's will." Celine scoffed. "This is ridiculous," she said. He continued, "We have to make sure Lynn doesn't ask questions. She's too trusting." I remember it because it didn't sit right. I stared at Mom. Her lips pressed tight. He added, "You were excluded intentionally. I heard them say it, she doesn't need to know. And the worst part, someone used the phrase, she'll stay quiet forever." That last part twisted something in my gut. Rick's voice came from upstairs, cracking like he'd just woken up or just stopped crying. "Dad called me last night." Everyone froze. I took that chance. "Mr. Hawk. Did you hear that exact phrase? Quiet forever?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. I did." Mom's face shifted, for a second, a flicker of something behind the eyes. Then she composed herself, straightened, and said, "Where do you get such fantasies?" Her words didn't land. They just floated, empty. I stood. "I don't need your permission to claim what's mine." Celine leaned forward. "You've never had the stomach for a fight. Always the soft one." I met her eyes. "That softness let me survive you." They didn't see me as dangerous. That was their mistake. I set the coffee down, untouched. "If there's one more lie, one more move against me, I'll make every document, every voicemail, every bit of this public." Verda whispered, low but audible, "Stop this before she destroys us all." I turned and walked out, not looking back. In the hallway, I passed a framed painting, Grandma holding me, smiling, her arms wrapped tight around the child they tried to cut out. Outside, the late light was dimming. As I stepped onto the back garden path, the grass soft under my shoes, I saw him. Rick, standing under the old oak tree, holding a file folder. A folder I hadn't given him. The call came mid-morning. Celine's name flashed on my phone like a ghost refusing to rest. "We'd like you to come by the estate," she said. "There's something we should have said long ago." Her voice was smooth, a practiced warmth I didn't trust. She used the word apology, but it landed flat in my ears. I stood staring at the wall for minutes after hanging up. The idea of stepping back into that house, the one that had shut me out so precisely, felt like agreeing to a trap. But I went anyway. Not to be soothed, but to be clear. I wore neutral tones, hair pulled back. No mascara, no perfume. My armor was simplicity. On the drive over, every turn brought up memories, sitting in the back seat as a teenager, silent after one of Celine's infamous talks, knowing no matter what I said, it wouldn't matter. Pulling up to the estate, I noticed Denise at the front steps. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. Inside, Celine was already seated in the parlor with a tea set waiting, Earl Grey, 2 sugars. She always assumed my preferences had never changed, as if people didn't grow. Rick wasn't there. Not surprising. When the family tension thickened, Rick became a shadow. His absence always meant the conversations were meant to sting. Celine folded her hands and looked at me as though she'd just finished rehearsing in the mirror. "Lynn," she said, voice low, "I want to apologize. We should have included you." Before I could even react, I caught Verda's whisper, sharp and careless, "Make sure she signs." Celine flinched, but didn't correct her. She just pressed on, "But you never really showed interest, until now." That was it. Not remorse. Not accountability. A justification wrapped in civility. I leaned back slowly. "You don't apologize for inclusion," I said. "You apologize for exclusion." She blinked, mask cracking for half a second. There it was, the truth I'd suspected all along. This wasn't about healing. It was about control. Performing empathy just long enough to get me on paper. Denise sipped her tea too quickly, her hands trembling. I pushed forward. "Did you know about the envelope before I did?" No one answered. I repeated it louder. "Did you?" Denise looked to Celine, then to her lap. Classic deflection. I kept going. "Hawk told me the will was changed. He said the contents." "He's lying," Verda snapped. "He always was dramatic." Then why did I get a voicemail warning me to stay silent? That froze the room. Even the clock on the mantel felt louder. I stood abruptly. The garden outside pulled me like a lifeline, air thick with heat but less heavy than inside. I sat on the edge of the stone bench. My hands gripped the edge, knuckles white. I remembered Maya Angelou's words like a warning. Believe them. The first time. And every time after that. I wasn't walking out empty again. Back inside, I faced them. "Starting today, I want a full accounting. Financial, legal, emotional. Everything. I'm not here to play parts in your performance anymore." Verda scowled, lips tight. Celine looked like the teacup in her hand might snap in two. I turned, walking slowly to the door, my heels clicking across the floorboards I used to clean as a child. At the threshold, I stopped, voice clear, even. "I won't forgive you this time." The email arrived just after sunset. I was in the kitchen, heating up leftover soup when the notification blinked. Subject: Vale Legacy Review Meeting, Mandatory Attendance. From Celine, naturally. I stared at the screen for a beat too long. The last time she used mandatory, I walked into a room where they had already made decisions for me. But I wasn't walking in blind this time. I drove in silence, no music. Just the hum of the tires and my thoughts running faster than the speed limit. The Vale building loomed ahead, polished glass and legacy pride, all the family portraits lining the hallways, none with me. Security cameras blinked above, like the house itself was watching. I passed the reception desk without a word. Even the front desk girl didn't make eye contact. The conference room lights were already on. I stepped in, and they were all there. Celine, poised like an MC. Denise with that permanent smirk. Verda, arms crossed, lips pursed. Rick was the only surprise. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in a week. Didn't look at me. Celine stood. "We're here to finalize the changes to the legacy structure," she said, like this was just another item on her calendar. Denise slid a document toward me. "It's standard. Withdrawal of claims. We're wrapping this up for good." I didn't touch it. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I want a full record of edits, who changed what, and when." Denise laughed under her breath. "You always did think you were entitled to everything just because you were Grandma's favorite." Rick still said nothing. Eyes down. Verda stepped in. "We've already begun filing. That document just formalizes what's already in motion." My jaw tightened. This wasn't a meeting. This was a setup. When Celine called for a short recess, I didn't follow them out. Instead, I veered left down the hallway and slipped into the back office. I still remembered the access code. Some things hadn't changed, like the smell of old paper and cold metal. That's when I heard them. "Denise. And Zephyrin, my cousin, the one I thought was neutral in all this." "He'll never find the originals," Denise whispered. "We hid them in the vault behind Hawk's old desk." "Do you think she suspects?" Zephyrin asked. "Not yet. But if she does, we deny everything." I stepped in. Quiet, but firm. "That won't work twice." They spun around. Denise's face drained. Zephyrin just stared. "What are you doing back here?" Denise snapped. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I'd heard enough. Betrayal doesn't always come with loud declarations. Sometimes it sounds just like family. Back in the conference room, Celine was already standing by the projector. On the screen behind her, a document glowed, Marion Vale, claimant summary. "That's not my name," I said, stepping forward. Celine's voice was smooth. "Exactly. Marion Vale has no legal standing in the trust. That identity doesn't appear in any of our records." Verda chimed in, cool as ever. "We suspect Marion was used to create confusion, perhaps by someone hoping to challenge us improperly." "You think I faked my own existence?" I asked. Whispers filled the room. Even Rick looked stunned. I turned to Mr. Hawk, seated silently at the end. "Did you ever hear of Marion Vale in our family history?" He looked uneasy. But then he shook his head. "No. That's new to me." "Mr. Hawk," Denise interrupted, "you told me once that name came up." "I didn't," he replied, his voice flat. I nodded. "I trust what he remembers more than what you rewrite." Celine blinked, caught off guard. Verda's hands tightened on the edge of the table. "Take that slide down," I said. Nobody moved. And then, something shifted. Rick stood. But before he spoke, something slipped from his lap and landed on the floor. A file. My name on it. His handwriting. I walked into the Heritage Hall just as dusk settled. The air inside was cool and quiet, the faint hum of old heating systems the only sound. Portraits of forebears lined the walls, stern faces in sepia frames. I paused at Grandma's portrait. Her gaze unwavering. I pressed a finger lightly to the frame, felt the glass chill. This is where I belonged, I reminded myself. I didn't come to beg. I came to claim. Denise met me at the doorway, eyes flickering. "We have something to show you," she said, voice clipped. She led me down the hall, past the echoing foyer, into the archive room. The lights were dim, the files stacked on tables. Cameras above watched. I stepped in anyway. Denise opened a drawer and pulled out ledgers, certificates, thin archival folders. She slid out a ledger marked church and birth records. She pointed, "See here. Mary Sol Linvale is listed. But in later records, the name Linvale is replaced with Marion Vale." She shrugged. "Clerical correction. Nothing major." I felt my pulse stutter. "Clerical correction doesn't erase a person," I said, voice steady. "You replaced Linvale with Marion? You removed me from my history." Verda's voice came through the doorway, cold. "Stop this drama." She stepped in, glare sharp. "We don't need theatrics." I demanded, "Show me the original ledger. The one Grandma signed. The one where I was meant to inherit." Denise hesitated. She glanced at her mother. "Let's move to the negatives," she said finally. I snapped at her, "No. I want the originals." She led me across the room to a locked cabinet. She extracted a set of photo negatives marked Original Family Album. I took them from her hand, cool film strips. I held them up to a lamp in the back corner. In one, I saw Grandma cradling me, my small hand tucked in hers. Rick and Celine beside us. In the framed, printed version in the grand hall, my figure was gone, cropped out. Deliberately, I laid them flat on the table. "Your framed version lies. This is the truth." The negatives showed my place among them. I saw the years they tried to edit me out. Denise paled. Celine snapped, "Stop messing with archives." Her words sharp as broken glass. My heart pounded. For years I had lived invisible. Now I stood visible. I straightened. "You cannot erase me and expect me to bow." I turned to Verda. "Why cut me out of images? What did you hope to prove?" Her face flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it. No answer. To Celine I said, "You used Marion to discredit me. But I have backups. Originals." I swept the negatives, the birth certificates, the ledgers into my bag. Evidence. Proof. All of it mine. I walked out. Each step deliberate. The room froze behind me. Outside, beneath the oak where Grandma used to sit, I found a folder on the ground. Sealed. Her handwriting on the flap, but stamped family secret. I arrived early to the hall. The Vale estate had never looked more staged. Red carpets, polished marble columns, bright lights, all set for a show. Journalists gathered, cameras trained on the podium. I stepped in, not with desperation, but with purpose. Verda stood beside Celine, statuesque and composed, as though she owned every inch. I caught her gaze briefly. She looked away. Celine began, voice measured, We are converging tonight to bring closure. The Vale family is ready to move forward under an irrevocable agreement. She waved to the legal team. The room quieted. Paper rustled. Someone pressed a button. Then, on the huge screen behind her, static flickered. And then the video began. First, Verda's voice: "If she resists, we'll bury her reputation first." Then Celine: "She won't fight forever." Followed by Rick sliding a letter addressed to me into a drawer: "She doesn't deserve to read this." Gasps. The crowd recoiled. Celine froze. The press burst into typing and murmurs. I rose. I walked to the podium. That video was never meant for public eyes, until I chose to publish it. My tone was steady. Verda's lips quivered. Celine's face strained. Then I pulled out the red envelope. The one Grandma sealed. I handed it to the moderator. "Read it aloud." He unfolded the document, every eye on him. "This contract grants full ownership of the estate to Mary Solon Vale. All later changes are null unless all heirs consent." The room erupted. Counsel looked stunned. Denise covered her mouth. Verda trembled. Celine's attorney stood speechless. I addressed them: "You can't hide what was signed first. You can't erase the truth when it's already in ink." Celine tried to reclaim control. "This was done without our knowledge." I replied: "Your backs always had my name on your ledger. You just pretended it never existed." Verda reached toward me. "Mary Sol. Please." Her voice broke. I held up my hand. "I've spent my life waiting in silence." "Not anymore." Reporters surged forward. Flashbulbs cracked. I walked the red carpet, past the portraits. There, my portrait hung, newly framed, between Rick and Celine. I paused. "Better late than never," I said softly, and moved on. Outside, a courier stood with an envelope. Sealed. Grandma's handwriting. A single word: "Remember." I woke to silence. The envelope from the courthouse sat on my desk, untouched for days. The morning light slipped through curtains, soft and forgiving. I reached for it. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was her handwriting, a letter from my grandmother, years old, sent too late. But in its pages, everything made sense. She wrote that despite the objections, the estate was always meant for me. She praised my quiet strength, my insight, my willingness to listen. She said, "They see noise, I saw silence becoming strength." My fingers traced those words. I felt a hollow ache for time lost. For years I fought to prove what she already believed. I pressed the paper to my chest, whispered, "You knew me best." Later, I sat in a legal office. The final agreement was signed. The estate transferred. No dramatic courtroom battle. Just quiet witnesses, a notary, and my signatures on the last page. The lawyers nodded. "Congratulations, Ms. Vale." It felt like a closure more than a victory. I offered no pleas, no demands. "Let them live with what they chose to ignore," I said softly. Outside on the courthouse steps, Denise appeared. She paused. She couldn't speak. She simply nodded. I accepted that. It was all she could muster. I inhaled deep. The past no longer had the power to hold me. Weeks later, I walked Boston streets until I found a community center. On its board, "Volunteers needed, writing classes for elders." I paused, then signed up. A few sessions later, I stood in front of 10 faces, most older than me, teaching them to reclaim their voice. One student looked up: "You make silence feel like something strong, not empty." That hit harder than any courtroom win. At home, I filled the space with things I chose: books, soft music, a small potted fern, journals. I began writing ink over ashes, page by page, reclaiming words they tried to erase. I wrote not for revenge but because I finally had the room to. Months later I drove out to her grave. The cemetery was hushed. I laid fresh lilies at her stone and held that letter in my hands. I read it aloud: "They tried to call me useless, but you knew better." My voice didn't tremble. Not from strength, but from peace. I placed a small plaque by her stone: "Legacy is not given, it's chosen." I walked away calm. In my hand, a journal, my manuscript, and a heart finally free. The next time someone called me useless, I didn't flinch. I smiled, signed the check, and walked away. I sat on the floor of my apartment, papers spread around me like broken glass. Legal documents. Handwritten letters. Bank records. Text messages. Years of silence now screaming in black and white. I poured a second cup of coffee, this time without sugar. I didn't need comfort, I needed clarity. I started writing. It wasn't a scorched earth letter. No names in bold. No threats. Just truth. Laid bare. It was addressed to my extended family, to the Whitman Holdings board, to the shareholders. Even to the staff who once smiled at me in the hallway like I was someone's decoration, not someone with a name. The tone was simple, firm. Truth has a quiet voice, but it echoes forever. I sent it through my attorney. I asked my journalist friend to publish it, without spin. And then I waited. The impact was quick, brutal, clean. Meetings were cancelled. Cousins who hadn't called in years suddenly remembered my number. Loretta went silent in the press. My father's name trended, for all the wrong reasons. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about release. Then the email came from a cousin I hadn't seen since college. He attached something, a scanned email chain from 30 years ago. Long before I was old enough to spell inheritance. It showed Loretta had done this before. Not just to me, but to our grandfather. The real will, the one he meant to file, never made it to probate. Loretta found a way to suppress it. She'd been rewriting Legacy like it was her family novel. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I added those emails to the public record. No rage. No added commentary. Just let the facts speak. They did. And then came the envelope. A personal check. 7 figures. No return address. No note. Just my father's name on the top line. I stared at it. Did he think this was an apology? A settlement? I sent it back. And I wrote him one line. You can't buy peace. You have to make it. He called that night. The first time I heard his voice without it sounding like strategy. He was quiet at first. Then he said, you deserved better. I didn't let the silence stretch long. We all did. Especially Mom. He didn't argue. He just said, yeah. That was it. No hug through the phone. No repair. But it was human. For once. A few days later, I drove out alone. The cemetery was quiet. I knelt down and placed the ring, the one that came in that package, on the cool stone. Some battles are won in court, I said. Some, in the heart. I didn't cry. I just breathed. On the way home, I stopped by Pearl's old friend's house. Handed her a small box with the last of the letters. She smiled like she already knew. I'll archive them, she said. With care. I nodded. Then I opened a small bank account. In my mother's name. It would fund legal support for women like me, women cut out of family wealth for speaking up, for not playing along. No press release. No fanfare. Just something to grow. At home, I filmed a short video. Just me. No makeup. No lighting tricks. Sometimes, I said, the seat at the table isn't worth it. Build your own table. And then I hit upload.